Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, and in our episode today, we speak with Dr. Randy Ross, entrepreneur, business owner, and three-time author. Our session with Randy is in two parts because he shared so much valuable information on relationships, on value creation, and providing high-level customer service, and about hope in the times that we're in right now in our world. Please enjoy On to the Ascent, the Success Ascent. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Success Ascent podcast. And my name is Pat Mancuso, and I'm the creator and host of the Success Ascent. And I am so excited to be with you today and introduce a gentleman that I've recently met, however, is a very good friend of a friend of mine. He's also a successful author, 2 times, soon to be 3rd time. He's also a pastor, as I understand. I'm sure he'll talk about that background here with us today. He is also a successful entrepreneur, leadership coach, consultant. There's so many things that Randy has done at a high level. So I'm going to let Randy do the bulk of the introduction. However, I'd like to welcome today Dr. Randy Ross to our Success Ascent podcast. Welcome, Randy.
Hey, Pat. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So first, let's talk about your background. You know, as I understand it, you started off as a pastor. And so talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, I did. I was a pastor for the first number of years of my career. That's my background. Even my doctorate, as my kids say, I have a doctorate, but I'm not the kind of doctor that makes any money.
Love it.
My doctorate is in theology. That's my background. Theology, philosophy, psychology. Those were my areas of study when I was in school. And I did pastor churches for the first number of years of my career. And the thing I loved about that, not only was I able to speak on a regular basis, obviously to help people to understand how they were designed by God and to fulfill their potential as they were created, but I also had the opportunity during that period of time to work with a lot of business leaders who were members of our church that had businesses, and they would say, can you come and address our team on this, or would you talk to us about that, or would you come and speak at this conference? And I just loved that. And I fell in love with the boardroom and began to see the opportunity to have a greater impact beyond the 4 walls of our church there in South Florida. And so made the transition over into the marketplace. And it was a dynamic transition. I loved it. So I'm a pastor at large to the marketplace right now, you could say. But I love to take transformational principles, transformational truths, and apply them practically to life to bring, wisdom and needed hope and encouragement to people. One of the reasons I did that is because I began to realize how so few people really enjoyed their work life. And since that consumed so much of our time, to me, that was a travesty. And so to be able to see and help people understand just how they were created, how they were designed with purpose, to live life with passion, to fulfill their potential. Those were all areas that I was excited to be able to bring some wisdom to the table to help them be able to enjoy life to the fullest. And so that's what I have the privilege of doing right now in corporate circles.
Well, and you know, you've written 2 books, soon to be a 3rd book, and the first one was titled Remarkable, and then the second one was Relationomics. And so as we started talking before we kicked off today, you talked about that remarkable premise, and let's start there. Let's go a little deeper into like what prompted you to go down that path, title it the way that you did, and what's the premise of that book?
Well, so Remarkable is not only the title of the book, but it's also the name of our company. And so Remarkable, the word itself is profound for us. It holds a great deal of significance. Remarkable means in a corporate or business sense that you provide a service or a product and you do so in such a way that you blow people away. You provide world-class service. You exceed all expectations. You bring more to the table than you take away, to the degree that when you leave someone's presence, they have this irrepressible desire to talk about you. And if you've left them with this irrepressible desire to talk about you, if they're remarking about you, then you indeed have become remarkable. And the way you do that is that you, in some small way, you make their story better. Because when you leave an indelible impression upon someone else, when you so positively impact their life and their world, if even just for a moment, if you brighten their day, then you've made an indelible impression and you've left your mark on that individual. So remarkable is all about bringing goodness into the world. It's all about living beyond yourself. It's all about creating a corporate environment that's based upon value creation. It truly is about leaving a positive wake in the world, creating movements of good. And here's what I like to say all the time is that people will do good business with organizations that do good. People just love to do that. They like to feel like when they're purchasing a product or they're engaged in a process that there's something beyond just the exchange of monetary value, that they're actually contributing to a higher cause, that they're doing something good in the world. And when organizations have that sort of social responsibility, when they have that sort of perspective or view of what it means to make the world a better place to live, then people will get behind that and they'll support that cause.
So give us an example, maybe without mentioning a particular company, give us an example of what that would look like with somebody that you've worked with or somebody that you come across.
Well, there are a number of organizations that we've worked with that do that they make life better for other people. And that's their primary focus. And it happens because their value construct is so solid. And there are national and international groups, the ones that come to mind that we have the privilege of working with are groups like Chick-fil-A, Keller Williams. Those are two big groups that people know, and they understand that their values are, let's just say, a cut above most.
Right.
It's not about just making money. It's about making a difference in people's lives. But we also work with a lot of small regional and local organizations that you may never have heard of. But here's the point. In their sphere of influence, in their world, they leave a mighty wake. And those who have affiliated with them or benefit from their services, they know the positive impact that group makes, no matter how small they may be. And they have a raving fan base that sustains them because they want to support a worthy cause. Right. And it really doesn't matter what you produce. It doesn't matter what widget you provide for the market. When people sense that you're doing so with such a view of making the world a better place, both internally for your team, but also externally for every single person that you touch, every single person that you encounter, it's a palpable difference. And all of us have probably had the experience of interacting with an organization where you just walked away and you go, they're just all about making money.
Right.
And they're going to do whatever they can to make money, and they're going to scrimp, and they're going to cut corners, and they're going to try to create greater margin for them to make, more dollars.
Right.
And you just walk away feeling, I just didn't feel good about that transaction. But in some situations, and I'll just say this, you don't mind paying more if you believe in that organization, in what they're doing, and how they're cultivating people, in the tone and the atmosphere that they're set. Here's how I say it, that people will gladly pay full price for those things that they deem bring true value to life. And that's what Remarkable is really all about. It's about growing to understand how each and every one of us can bring true value to life. And that goes far beyond a process. It goes far beyond a product. It's about taking care of people and making a positive difference in their lives.
So many of our listeners will be small to medium-sized business owners, entrepreneurs. And so, what's the challenge? I mean, everything you said is so common sense and seems so simple, and yet why doesn't everybody do it?
Yeah, well, that's the question for the ages, right? Because most of what I teach, you would think it's commonsensical, but unfortunately, it's not common practice. And it's the reason for that is I think that sometimes we forget the simple lessons of life. But the best, most profound lessons are the ones that we've taken for granted and we've actually moved away from. And there are a ton of groups that we work with, small entrepreneurs. We do a lot of work in the restaurant and hospitality space with franchisees, and they have their own small business. But you also have a lot of individual entrepreneurs who may be doing work under a much larger corporate umbrella, be that real estate agents or mortgage professionals, where they have their own business, but they're under a bigger banner, but their business is totally driven by referrals. It's a referral-based book of business. And in those situations, the principles of Relationomics and the principles of Remarkable are so profound and so necessary, because you cannot build a small business, or as a small business owner, you can't be successful unless you understand, embrace, and apply these very principles that we're talking about. So what I like to do is I like to take what sometimes may be a little bit more complex issues, but distill them down to their essence and make them very simple to grasp and simple to apply. Because if you can't walk away with a handle on some principles that you can take and immediately apply, then you're just talking theory, and you may be in your head, but you're not moving from your heart.
Right.
So Albert Einstein said this, that any fool can take something simple and make it complex through convolution and misdirection. And there are a lot of people who take the simplicity of life and they make it complex.
Right.
But it takes a measure of genius to take complex ideas, distill them to their essence, and then be able to articulate them simply. But I believe that in order for us to apply these principles to make a profound difference, that they have to be simple to grasp and simple to apply.
So you mentioned Relationomics, and that was your second book, and happen to have a copy. And
Yeah.
And I love this because it's always about relationships, right? When things get tough, and oh my gosh, the times that we're in right now, I believe relationships for small to medium-sized businesses are so important, and those long-term relationships. And so tell us how this book came along. You know, the Remarkable makes a lot of sense, and yet how did this book come along?
So Relationomics was an outgrowth of Remarkable. Remarkable was a leadership parable, and we talked about the principles of value creation. And everybody talks about value creation, you know, bring value, add value, create value for others, but very few people really know how to do that effectively.
Right.
And so that's why we wrote the parabolic format to impart those principles. But in Relationomics, what we wanted to do is we wanted to come behind Remarkable and really break it down into some very easy principles and practices that leaders could apply to build their business. And so the subtitle of Relationomics is Business Powered by Relationships. And as you said, Pat, you know, you think that's common sense, but the reality is there's so many people in the world who don't have healthy relationships. And as I spanned, you know, the spectrum and looked at the corporate setting, I saw so much unhealthy behavior, toxic cultures, environments where people were not inspired at all to bring their best to work. And that concerned me because if you're going to be healthy and happy, then relationships are at the very core, the very essence of well-being and productivity. And so many organizations have floundered just simply because they've not applied good, solid principles of relational development, either in building teams or in building strong partnerships, which are necessary for small businesses.
So how does it get off track? And does it get off track? And then a third kind of topper of that is the environment that we're in right now. You know, you hear about, let's just take divorce, that's a relationship, where we're seeing a skyrocketing of divorce rates because people are spending more time together, which is an interesting dynamic. So how does it get off track?
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately what happens is that all of us, can we just be honest and just say we're all broken?
Yes. Hello.
And I mean, just to cut to the chase and make it simple and strip away the facade. And And the reality is that what happens all too often is that there's this myopic disposition or myopic attitude, and that creates a toxic environment. And I don't care whether it's in a small business, a large corporation, in your home environment, where there's this self-promotion, unhealthy competition. I'm going to win. Even in arguments, or let's call them lively conversations at home. Okay, let's don't call them an argument. Let's just say you have a lively conversation with your spouse or your kids. And by jingo, I'm going to win this.
Yeah.
And so there's self-promotion, unhealthy competition. There's self-protection, the fear of being found out. And so we mask and we hide and we pretend, rather than dealing honestly and look deeply in ourselves to call out those areas where we don't bring the best of who we are, to the table. There, in corporate circles or business circles, there's this idea of using people as pawns, because we use people for personal gain. And you see that happening all the time. And one of the expressions of that oftentimes is networking. I mean, how many networking events have you been to where someone comes up and says, well, what do you do? And you start explaining, and not very long into the conversation, they get this glassy look across their eyes, and they lose interest because they begin to realize you don't have anything that you can contribute to their agenda.
Right.
And so they start looking over, your shoulder for the next victim, and they try to move on to the next victim. And those kinds of things happen all the time because of self-promotion and using other people, as opposed to going into those environments, not networking, but what I call net weaving. And net weaving means that when I enter into a conversation with you, Pat, I want to ask as many exploratory questions as I can about your endeavors and about you, so that then I can try to support you in your endeavor, support you in your effort, and connect you with people that I know if I can't help you, there's probably someone in my sphere of influence that I know that can help you. And most people are only 2 or 3 introductions away from success.
Yeah.
And so if I enter in with that sort of a selfless servant mentality where I want to provide for you what you need to be successful, it may not serve me in the short term, but in the long term, I can't begin to tell you, that will come back in folds,
Right.
multiple times over, if that's a true spirit of contributing to others, bringing more value to the table than you take away, which is one of the principles of value creation. Do you bring more to the table than you take away? Now, I'm kind of chasing a bunch of rabbits here, so you rein me in if you need to. But
you're doing a great job.
No, but value creation is this idea that in the world, there are only 2 kinds of people. There are value creators and there are value extractors. And I've seen a ton of people who go into every endeavor and their primary objective is to position themselves in that conversation or in that business endeavor to extract as much as they possibly can for themselves. It's based on a scarcity mentality. It's driven by fear, but they're value extractors, and you can tell. And then there are other people who are value creators, and their primary perspective on life, their worldview is, how can I position myself to bring the very best I have to the table to contribute to the endeavor of other people? And here's what's so cool. If everybody you deal with is a value creator, and you all bring more to the table than you take away,
right,
at the end of the day, there's a surplus on the table that then can be shared by everybody who helped to create that value. But if you get involved with value extractors, then they've all positioned themselves to rush to the table as get as much as they can for themselves as possible. At the end of the day, there's nothing left on the table. Fold up the table, go home, the game is over. And so it's critical that you become a value creator and you surround yourself with value creators. And there are ways that you can identify those individuals. And that's what we talk about in Relationomics, because I saw this overwhelming, sad scenario where teams, lacked creativity. They lacked innovation because they lacked collaboration for low levels of trust. And so in Relationomics, what I really wanted to do was untangle a lot of the issues that people encounter in the workforce and provide for them some simple solutions to make life and work much better.
Well, and you don't only talk about this, you do it, because in our initial conversation, we talked about some of the commonalities in our consulting businesses, and one of the things that we've talked about over the years and have trained leaders on is really going deep with their folks, because you can't get in a relationship if you don't go deep with them. And many times they don't know a lot about the people that they actually hired and they spend 8 hours a day and the majority of their life with. And you did that. I mean, you did that. That was, how can I contribute to you? And the mutual friend that introduced us, John Prescott, I mean, it was one of the things he said. He said, Randy is a guy who's going to contribute. And so you don't only talk about it, you actually do it. So I appreciate that.
Well,
So,
I appreciate that, but let me just kind of do that. Thank you for that, because it's all about relational connectivity and depth of relationships. And one of the things that I see so frequently is people in a panic, particularly in these days, these times that we're experiencing, they're in a panic and they're trying to broaden the net of their relationships. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But here's what I challenge so many people to do. This is not the time to broaden your relationships. This is the time to deepen your relationships. Because if you and I have both been on LinkedIn a lot, where people want to connect with you. And as soon as you connect with them, there's a sales pitch.
Right.
It's like, dude, I don't even know you.
Right.
We just connected on LinkedIn. I know nothing about you. Yeah, I'm sure you have a great service, but I'm not interested in exploring it. And so many people are panicking and throwing that relational net out there. And I think it's the conundrum of our day and age, where people are socially connected, but relationally distant. Or I would even say relationally bankrupt. You have thousands and thousands of connections on Facebook and LinkedIn, but you don't know them deeply and they don't know you deeply. And there's not a depth of relationship.
And therefore you can't contribute to them. Because you don't know enough of the points to be able to contribute to them. And it feels like it goes back to that theory of scarcity. Instead of the abundance with a smaller group, it's the scarcity with the larger group. So in the book, there were some pieces in here that I wanted to go deeper on. You've titled to his chapter, The Great Deception. And you said growth requires change, and most people are change resistant. Again, that seems such common sense, and yet what do people struggle with to change? What have you found?
Well, in order to change, several things have to take place. First of all, there has to be authenticity. And authenticity, simply defined, Pat, is being honest with yourself about yourself. And that's hard for people to do, because, we all want to put our best foot forward. We want to be seen in the best light. And so we purport to be more than we are. We pretend, we keep up this pretense. We posture ourselves in interpersonal encounters to be all that. Sometimes we lack the humility to say, well, I just don't know, or that's not an area of expertise for me, or whatever the case may be. But authenticity is looking at yourself through a very clear mirror and seeing, and embracing your humanity. So authenticity is being honest with yourself about yourself. And then transparency is being honest with others about yourself and about the situation. And because we lack that humility to have those two components, I think a lot of times it's difficult to get behind the veil of what people, throw up as a pretense. And therefore we don't connect on a deeper level. So the deception is that we can all raise ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and we can't. It's what I call the self-help conundrum. You can't raise yourself up to your full potential all by yourself. And here's why. It's real simple. Blind spots.
Right.
You've got them. I've got them. We've all got them. And those are the things about us that we don't see clearly that other people do.
Like crystal clearly. They see it so simply.
Oh yeah. It's like, so, if you really want to get to know yourself better, just ask those closest to you, what is it like for you to be on the other side of me? No, it's a scary question, because
it's a great question, by the way.
It's a great question.
Oh my gosh.
It's a great question to garner healthy feedback, but it's scary. I remember the first time I asked my wife, "Hey, baby, what's it like to be on the other side? What's it like to have me as a husband?" And I'm prepared to, get all the fluff and pats on the back. And she did, to her credit. She threw some really good, strong affirmation into the mix early on. And then she said, "However, if you really want to know," and then that was followed by a quite lengthy, dissertation on those areas in which I could improve and close some gaps. And it was honestly, Pat, it was painful.
Yeah.
But those conversations still rank among the most significant conversations in my own personal growth and development. But it's a question that we're afraid to ask because it strips away the veneer. It causes us to be vulnerable. It's very risky. Sometimes it's painful to hear what other people have to say about that. But it's absolutely essential, because until those blind spots are exposed and we're willing to do the deep work of delving in and working on those to close those gaps, we will never reach our full potential. And so the self-help conundrum is this idea that no matter how much material is on the market,
Right,
for development and personal growth, we're never going to achieve it if we don't know where to start.
Thanks for joining us on the Success Ascent today with Randy Ross for part 1 of our conversation. We covered a lot of territory today, and ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, part 2 is as amazing as part 1. So please, we look forward to having you come back on the Success Ascent. Have an amazing day. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to the Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next ascent.